So I just wanted to come on and make a little short snippet, but I think when we talk about interracial dating and people marrying interracially and they're doing it prematurely, it's because you don't take into consideration the cultural differences. You just don't take into consideration cultural differences. And I think even persons who find themselves in other oppressed groups, it's just not the same, because Here's the thing. I mean, despite Hispanics, Hispanics have a culture that is so rich and that is so intertwined and so connected. And obviously, yes, I'm not saying, that they're perfect. I'm saying that, yeah, there's dysfunction and all the other things that are present. But my overall arching theme when I say Hispanics and their culture is that Hispanic culture is they're very familial, very communal, right? And so it's not the same. You know what I mean? It's not the same in comparison to African American culture, because in our culture, there's divisiveness, right? And that was intended, So there's that. So though they may come to America and they may experience discrimination and all these different things, they didn't experience the eruption from the inside of their culture. They still have their culture. And you'll see that everywhere you go. And it's actually something that is, very admired. However, I think that they have their own complexities, right? You start talking about Afro-Latinas and you start talking about lighter Latinas and, all the different things. And so I don't even think I'm using like the category. I don't think I'm using this correctly. I say Hispanics, I say Mexicans, I say Latinas. I'm not geographically sound. So let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. All right. Culturally, it's just not there. And I think, in part of that is because I've just never been given the opportunity to meet with those of the Spanish descent. Okay. I've just never had that opportunity. I think I met one girl, and I actually don't know. I don't know. I think she was Hispanic, I don't know. At the time I didn't inquire, I wasn't culturally competent. We were kids, I didn't think much of it, but yeah. I've not been given the opportunity to meet such persons and learn. And I think for me, because I do have a very strong love for journalism, I much rather do it in the real time. Like, I can go get a book and read about it, and sure, I should probably do that to educate myself, obviously, so I don't get on here and sound like, very incompetent. But at the same time, I feel like I just think there's really something so beautiful in real world experiences, things you can see, things you can touch. I just think that's where the truth lies. So I'm sorry, y'all. I definitely dropped the ball there, but yeah, we're going to keep pushing. So anyway, their culture is different. And then I think for other oppressed groups who may be oppressed in their countries, please understand, when people come to America, it's completely different. And I'm not negating the fact that people work hard. People come from nothing, and when they come to America and all of these things, but what they have, okay, is this sense of communal stability and communal support. Okay, that is the crux. It's not even just a matter of playing favorites. You come to American society and we know that even Africans, right, have a little bit more, I ain't gonna say a little bit more, have favorability with white Americans, right? They come to America and their first, where they migrate is to whiteness. Now, you can say that's because of white supremacy. I think it could be white supremacy, but I also think it's cultural and social conditioning. But I also think that it's an overarching theme that, white people, whether it's through their own, curiosities, they are more accepting of other oppressed groups than African Americans. I don't know what it is about their neighbor that they just cannot face. I don't know what it is about us. You know what I mean? Obviously, we know it's a lot of historical context there, but at the same time, it's we are just the one persons that they just cannot acknowledge, and it's really sad. It's it makes you question, okay, do you see us as humans? Do you still see us as 1/4 of men? I mean, what are we doing, But anyway, so there's that. And so when I talk about interracial relationships, I'm just saying that you're dealing with a bunch of persons who just have culture and who have support, and it's just not the same. And I just think that, to exist in their world or to coexist together requires such an erasure of your blackness, and I think that even if they're supportive, I mean, I think that could be enough. If you have someone and they're supportive and they're loving and they have all the characteristics, I think it could be enough, because that's typically what matters at the end of the day. But I think there will always kind of be that disconnect, and I think after a while, especially if you're African American, you'll just stop seeking to connect on that way. You'll just kind of find other mediums, other resources to connect, because they won't be able to connect with you. Now, I also want to talk about this too, because I ran into an old friend, and as I was talking to her, relating with her, something that was constant for me, and what I realized when I'm like doing small talk or I'm just talking to people, randomly, is we start talking about prices. We start talking about how high everything is. We start talking about racism. And it made me question, how do we relate as Black people? What is our point of relation? I started to realize that, how, like, for example, I was out in another time, this is all the same day. Another time I was out buying clothes for my daughter, and the young man at the register was like, "You cashing out," and in a moment, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be humble, but this is awkward. You know what I mean? And I'm like, in part, it's a compliment. I'm grateful I'm able to take care of my daughter, but I didn't know how to receive that. I didn't know what to do with that. You know what I mean? You don't want to stunt. You know what I mean? You don't want, you just kind of brush it off. But at the same time, words have power. Y'all know I'm a writer. You know what I mean? It's a journey. It's a journey. I'm a writer. It's a journey. We're not there yet. But at the same time, I'm like, what do I do with this? Y'all know how it used to be back in the day. You used to show up with the fresh, you were fresh. You was clean for school. People be like, oh, you shining, you this, you that. Your mama got this, your daddy got that, And it's like, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? Because I just think somewhere in our minds, maybe we know that we're struggling. Somewhere in our minds, maybe we know that even if you as the individual may not be struggling, we know that as a collective, we struggling. You know what I mean? So it's like, I feel I don't even think the word is despondent, but I just feel a little displaced, when we're in Black spaces and we're trying to relate to one another. And it's like, what do we talk about? You know what I mean? Is our point of relation the civil rights? Did we ever, I don't want to say transgress. Did we ever move beyond that? You know what I mean? Is that our point of relation? Is that the Blackness? Do we relate to one another through the collective struggles, the oppression, the collective, systems that oppress us? Like, how do we relate to one another as Black people? You know what I mean? Let's talk about it, because I think that is so good. That is so good. Even people who I know who got money, their businesses is thriving, they're doing it, they still coming to me relating on the struggle. And not because they think I'm struggling, not because they even, know what my struggles are, wherever privy to that information. But just there's something about Blackness that I think is crazy, our paradigm, and our framework, and how we exist as a culture, and the way in which we relate to one another, because it just always seems like it's through the struggle. That's crazy to me, even if we're not struggling, and it makes me question the grand picture, right? The bigger picture, rather. Do we have a place in society? Because we're here, we're there. There's the representation. You know what I mean? We're doing it. We're in yoga, right? We're in Western spaces. We're doing it. But at the same time, here we are relating on the oppression. Here we are with the scholars who are free. People who are free. I mean, you talking free, I'm talking freedom. They're not confined. You know what I mean? They're not bound by certain type of ideologies. I mean, these people are free mentally, physically, financially, spiritually, right? They're not bound up and pent up with the religion. And it's like we still relate on the struggle. Now, I'm not saying this to critique. I think the more that I go on and say we relate on the struggle, this is becoming more of a sounding like a parody or something that's a little bit more critical. I'm not here to critique. I'm just here to explore. And I just want to kind of share this with y'all. Like, that's crazy. I just think that's crazy. You know what I mean? So I'm like, man, how do we relate as Black people? I think as Black women, well, and Black men too. I don't think this is something that's a constant. Well, let me not lose the plot. I'm going to stop here because I don't want to lose the plot. I'm going to go on and say like the opposite coin and how I've related, but no, let's stop here. Think about this. Peace.